So on November 19, 1863, Edward Everett, who was a Massachusetts diplomat, clergyman, in a pretty well-respected order, he got up and he spoke for about 2 hours. The occasion was the commissioning of a national cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So I have no idea what Mr. Everett said, but I can tell you what happened next. Is that he sat down and President Lincoln got up. And he spoke from, I don't think a podium, but I don't actually know. He said about 270 words, 269 words, 10 sentences. And we now know them as the Gettysburg Address, which by a show of hands, how many of you had to memorize this in elementary school? Oh, that's not as many as I thought. That's a pretty important piece of American political thought. So what I wanted to do was try to figure out why in the world that was so important. What made it so impactful, so lasting? And so what we'll talk about is a little bit of historical influence, a little bit of contemporary influence, and a little bit of poetic, rhetorical analysis in terms of what kind of things went into the construct, the structure of the address. So, okay, so I have a quick challenge. There are 2 pieces that are very, very similar. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, some of you had to memorize it. And Pericles, who actually some of us will recognize from our Plexite capstone, his funeral oration from the Peloponnesian War. So these 2 pieces, they actually run scary similar. So what I want to try to challenge you is, can you tell the difference? So I think on this person you probably could. All men are created equal on top, that's Lincoln. Down there below, we have the excerpt from Pericles' his attempt to commemorate the dead of Athens during the Peloponnesian War. And what you'll see is there's a very similar theme. So Lincoln and Pericles they're both highlighting this cause, this concept, this construct, this government, this unique form of human existence that they both are so devoted to. And they're pointing to that and saying, oh, this was so worth it. So which one do you think is which here? Yes? Nice. They're both harkening back. They're both looking back toward what had come before, and they're highlighting the importance and the significance of what has been established. Lincoln in the case of the Union, Pericles in the case of Athens, this great democratic experiment. This is an excerpt from Lincoln. I won't make you guess anymore because I don't think anybody really wanted to. An excerpt from Lincoln. And it goes further to illustrate that similarity. So when you look at that, you cannot dedicate, you cannot consecrate, you cannot hallow this ground. The brave men who struggled here have already consecrated. They've done more to honor this ground than we could ever possibly do. Compare that to what Pericles says about the dead of Athens. He says that the whole earth is going to be tomb one day, and there is nothing that we can do, we as Athenians who are lasting, to further honor the sacrifice. So again, hugely similar themes. One of the other major influences was an abolitionist sermon that Lincoln had actually attended with his foreign law partner. So this is going to speak to another couple of the big influences on Lincoln, and I think another couple of the reasons that we still know this speech today. So Theodore Parker is this minister. His quote is below. The quote above is probably one that you recognize, it's one that we still know. That's the one that Lincoln gave in the Gettysburg Address. Of the people, by the people, for the people. It's this hugely popular, hugely sort of universally known concept from the Gettysburg Address. That's where that comes from, and it really does, in my opinion, speak to those influences on Lincoln and what really drove him, what drove this important piece of American political thought. And I'll go real quickly because I'm already running short on time. In terms of rhetorical devices, poetic devices that went into the address, they're actually incredibly nuanced. A lot of them are very subtle, but there's 270 words. They're packed with these little ways that Lincoln was pulling in the audience and was really making his message felt. So the triple is this great tool that Lincoln actually uses in a ton of his work. So we have 3 separate sections, and there's a really consistency with how often it goes back to this concept of the triple. Since we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot howl. It's this great sort of rhythmic theme that runs throughout. Verb usage is great. There's this definite appeal to the pathos of the audience. There's this emotional usage of verbs. I'll go back to that same example. You cannot dedicate, consecrate, hallow. It talks about remembrance. So there's the very emotional verbs. And he does this, in my opinion, is this great thing. It's very subtle. He shifts into passive voice. He wants to imply that the responsibility for something lies with someone else. And in my opinion, when you see this second line here, we are engaged in a great civil war. We are met on a great battlefield. Passive voice sort of implying that the fault of those things is elsewhere, the Confederacy. And then antithesis. There's a bunch of different examples of this. You can see them if you just kind of come through. They died so that we may continue to, so that you may continue to live on. There's this juxtaposition of living and death, of these opposite concepts that really serves to highlight and sort of dramatize works. So that's all my time. I hope you can sort of see that there are, at face value, while the address, like command, may have been relatively simple, there's a real depth here to the address and certainly to Lincoln's thought, Lincoln's construct of these few words. Yes. Any questions?
Did you notice the congruencies?
I'm sorry?
Where did you notice these congruencies?
Congruencies between Pericles and Lincoln, or?
Yeah, especially that.
So we actually read Thucydides, the history of the Peloponnesian War, in our poli-sci capstone. So it's just this weird connection, yeah. That it was, and the speeches, it's unbelievable. I highlighted some of the ways that they were really similar. The speeches, they really run side by side, these very similar themes, this very similar construct, where they both look to the past and say, what this incredible example of what we've sort of established, how worthy that is of sacrifice and how inspired we should all be to sort of further that, those concepts, that system of governments for peace and that sacrifice.
Anybody been to Gettysburg? Yeah. Been on that battlefield?
Mm-hmm.
Powerful, right?
Yeah.
It's like sacred ground. I mean, at least I was moved quite a lot when I went there.
I was 16, so I was
Yeah,
like,
okay.
whatever.
I mean, you come out there, it's just like kind of his point, right? The hallowed ground. It's all about commemorating, but by not commemorating, right? His point is